Hello students, today we are going to discuss a short story titled The Wristwatch, written by Premchand. Before dealing with the story, let's have an introduction about the author. Dhanpat Rai Srivastava, whom the world today knows as Premchand, the great modern writer of Hindi, needs no introduction to patrons of Hindi or Urdu literature. His Godan, Karma Bhumi, Premashram, Ghaban, Nirmala, etc. are classic novels painting different vistas of Indian society of early 20th century and can be best described as a true description of an epoch. His short stories also echoed the contemporary times through the real flesh and blood characters ranging from khadi-clad satyagrahis to ordinary peasants, men and women, and even animals. Premchand's works, which are pen photographs of contemporary society, re-echo the changing conditions of existence and psychology under the impact of various currents of thought. They are full of action. Before Premchand came to break new ground, the short story was unknown and novels were very few. The second-rate literature was characterized by spicy tales of romance, imagination and adventure, mystery, castles, corridors, all a world of dreamland and fantasy, far removed from reality. Premchand transformed all this. From the stultifying atmosphere of ivory tower, literature was transported into the hectic and atomistic life of cities or the free breezes of the village fields. Premchand took to writing at a very young age. At the age of 13, he wove a skit around the love affair of a distant uncle. At 14, he wrote a little drama called Hona Har Brihan Ke Chikne Chikne Pat. His first novel was written when he was just 19. Part of his urge for writing must be ascribed to vast reading. He read whatever came his way. An important influence on Premchand was the Indian National Congress, which was founded 4 years after his birth. There was a lot of impact of the social movements that were happening in the country. In 1907 appeared Premchand's first short story titled Duniya Ka Sabse Anmol Ratan. Its theme was that the most valuable thing in the world is the drop of blood shed in defense of the motherland. The keynote of all Premchandian literature is genuine sympathy for peasants. The theme of Godan is Premchand's favorite theme that deals with the Indian peasant. Premchand's novels, excellent though they are, scarcely present him as well as do his short stories. In spite of the fact that in his later days, the novelist in him asserted itself more and more, he remained primarily a short story writer. And it is in this field that his success and popularity remain unsurpassed. Out of his 220 short stories, there are many literary masterpieces. Premchand brought the short story out of the dreamland and introduced contemporary themes and plausible plots. All were taken from real life. Kings and fairies gave place to ordinary men and women engaged in their struggle for existence. Premchand talks about his writing, his characters in his own words like this. I quote, "The majority of my characters are drawn from real life, though they are sufficiently veiled. Unless a character has some basis in reality, it is shadowy, uncertain, and unconvincing." About a short story, he also says the following lines. An ideal short story must throw light on some aspect of life. It must examine critically and courageously the conventions of the society. It must deepen the inherent instinct in man for the good, the true, and the beautiful. It must quicken his sense of curiosity and must be based on a psychological truth. This is what Premchand felt about short story, and that is reflected in all his short stories. The story revolves, as the title suggests, around a wristwatch that the protagonist borrows from his friend. While visiting his in-laws' place, he borrows many things to project a better picture of himself, because he has seen people hiding their poverty and pretending to be rich while visiting their in-laws. So he thought he also must follow that and project himself as being better than what he is actually. A silk achkan and a pair of flex shoes were a long cherished dream, and he could obtain them with the help of friends. He could also manage to get a suitcase, which is a leather one, and a fountain pen from another two friends. The friends are generous on such occasions because they knew that their turn also would come sooner or later. And the only thing missing was a wristwatch. He plans to borrow the wristwatch from his friend Danu. Danu is rich, but not the one who would show his pomp. The narrator cleverly manages, through flattery and pampering his son, to attain the watch from Danu. Though Danu had attached a sentimental value to it, he agrees to lend the watch, but it is against his principles, because his golden rule of life was that lending things would ruin relationships. So he never believed in lending anything to anybody. But this time he lends his watch to his friend. And also, while lending, he reveals the fact that he bought the watch for just 25 rupees from a person who had no money and was dying for a drink. But he definitely believed that it must have been quite expensive, which is not less than 1,000 rupees. So he gives the actual price of the watch, and he also says that he was clever enough to manage and purchase it for a lesser price. Now, taking the watch from Danu, the narrator visits his in-laws' place. He was overwhelmed with joy when he was welcomed with a lot of respect and admiration. But the wife's reaction was unexpected. She was more upset than happy, as she was under the impression that he spent all the money on himself alone. She was also annoyed that he did not bring any treasures for her. At that point, he gets irritated and he prepares to leave. The pleasure which he derived on his welcome has vanished, and he started contemplating. After much thought, he reveals the truth to his wife that he had to borrow from his friends to buy these things. The wife seemed to be appeased at that, and she inquires about the cost of the watch because she was very much impressed with the watch, and she asks him how much he had to spend on that watch. Instead of telling the truth that it is not his and he had borrowed it, he says that he bought it, and also that he bought it for just 35 rupees. Being impressed by the watch and also the price that it's just 35 rupees, the wife wants to retain the watch with her. Now he is in a fix. He can neither tell her that it is his friend's watch and he has not bought it, nor can he take it from her because she said she liked it and she wants to keep it with her. He might as well buy another one for himself. The story takes an unexpected turn when he gives the watch away to his wife. He doesn't reveal the truth to his friend and says that he lost the watch. Danu, being very particular about the watch, he gets very angry when he gets to know that it is lost. He shouts at the narrator and he says, "You better repay me the amount." Now at this point, he was helpless. He couldn't help. He had to pay back the money to Danu because it is with his wife and he has to give him the money. He tries to explain, but all his attempts were futile. They go in vain. Danu was not a person to listen. He also tries to explain him that he is living with just 30 rupees a month, which is very difficult to keep the body and soul together. Danu was not ready to listen to any of his explanations. He insisted that he should somehow plan to survive with 15 rupees a month so that he will be left with another 15 which he can pay to Danu towards the repayment of the watch. So realizing that Danu would not yield, he prepares himself to cut down on his expenses. He tries to manage with 15 rupees a month and gives 15 rupees to Danu. Now after 4 months, it comes as a good news from the head clerk that he has been chosen for a special allowance of 15 rupees per month from the head office, and also that it is not entered in the register. Now seeing his sincere payment, Danu Babu tells him that the price of the watch is repaid and suggests him that he go and get his wife so that it's not correct for him to leave her for a long time in her parents' house. Though reluctant, the narrator accepts because Danu Babu insists that he should go and get back his wife. He persuades him to go to the village. He assures him that things would be fine, and so, being persuaded, being convinced, the narrator goes to the village to fetch his wife. After 3 days, when he came back along with the wife, he was surprised to see that Danu was waiting for him at the station. He never expected Danu to come to the station for him. Danu took him to his house and asked them to stay there till they found a suitable shelter. Now this was unexpected from Danu. And the narrator at this point was more worried that he would notice the watch on his wife's wrist. He did indeed see the watch, but he did not say anything. Later, he says that it was a gift from him to his wife. And Danu also gave narrator 100 rupees and he told that it is a gift to him. The narrator was very happy at this kind gesture of Danu, which was most unexpected. When the real increment has come in the office, the head clerk told him that he shouldn't be greedy enough to expect the special allowance of 15 rupees that he was getting earlier. And he also reveals that Danu was instrumental in his special allowance, which is strictly his office affair. And when confused about this, the narrator wants to know the secret behind Danu being involved in this matter. He goes to Danu, but he refuses to reveal anything about the allowance and he tries to change the topic. On insisting further, he accepts that he had been the culprit and may be treated in any manner whatsoever it may be. The narrator finally realizes that it is Danu without whom he wouldn't have realized the importance of life and would have never brought his wife back. Thus, Danu taught him a lesson for the life. The success of a short story hinges on the successful portrayal of the character. So let us begin with the first important character in the story, that is the protagonist. The story runs in first person and the narrator presents the story from his perspective. That is, we look at the characters from his perception. At the beginning of the story, he is presented as a lazy, irresponsible man. He earns 30 rupees per month and thinks that there is no other way of increasing his income. He avoids bringing his wife on that pretext. He makes occasional visits to his in-laws' place. On one such visit, he borrows various things from his friends so as to project a false impression about himself, and he derives pleasure when people look at him in awe. He doesn't maintain a fair relation with his wife either. When she asks him about all those luxurious things, he tells her lies that he borrowed money from his friends to buy those things. He was upset to see that his wife is not interested in his health but more interested in the wealth that he had made and the lavishness that he is enjoying. He is aware of the character of his friend Danu. Still, he attempts to borrow a wristwatch from him. But he never had a bad intention of stealing away things that he borrowed. He is sincere and committed towards his work. He admits sincerely that he has to repay for the watch that he is not able to return. He never denies, he accepts it. There was a remarkable change in his attitude. He decides to cut down on his expenses to 15 rupees as he had to pay Danu the remaining 15. When he realizes his mistake, he never commits the mistake of misusing the funds again. He follows the advice of his friend and brings his wife back. Towards the end of the story, when he understands that it is all because of Danu that he could change his life, he wants to thank him and admits that but for Danu, his life wouldn't have been so good. Thus, we can say that he is a round character who has changed from a lazy escapist to a responsible husband. Moving on to the next important character in the story, that is Danu. Danu Babu is a very important character and he is an example of a true friend. At the beginning, he seems to be very strict and particular about things. He was only very clear about things, but he was never rude. He strongly believed that lending things would mar the relationships. But people mistook him to be discourteous whenever he refused to lend anything to them. The only thought that he wants to show his riches is being very possessive about his belongings. When his friend came with tears to share the news that the watch was lost, Danu was not moved. Instead, he was angry. He was stubborn and he made it very clear to his friend that he might make his own arrangements to repay the amount. All the entreaties from his friend that he cannot survive on 15 rupees could not move Danu. So he is very strict, very stubborn, very strong. The real character of Danu is revealed only when he gives 15 rupees to the head clerk and asks him to pay that as a special grant to his friend. And he retains that as a secret. It is never known till the end of the story that it is Danu who is paying his friend. He helps his friend realize that one should know how to survive with what one earns. He also motivates him to get his wife back, as it is his responsibility to take care of his wife. Though he does a lot of help to his friend, he never talks about it. He remains humble and he does not reply when his friend asks him how is he related to the special grant that he was receiving from the head office, where he is not related to the office matters. On insisting further, he brushes away the matter, saying that it was just a practical joke. Danu is an important character in the sense that without him, there wouldn't be any change in the character of the protagonist. These are the two main characters. Now we move on to the next character, that is of the head clerk. Though a minor role in this story, the character of the head clerk is important because he could maintain the secret of Danu. Danu wanted to help his friend and his intention was untainted. The head clerk not only paid the protagonist an amount of 15 rupees every month, but also maintained it a secret. He told that it came from the head office as a special grant. It was not entered in the register though. He never revealed that Danu gave that amount. Even towards the end, he only says that Danu might know how the amount came, but he never reveals that it was Danu who was giving the amount. The loyalty of the clerk is also reflected in the story when he says that he wouldn't have allowed if the increment was at the cost of somebody else. Now finally we have another important character, that is the wife of the protagonist. The character of the wife takes a major role in the story. Though she doesn't have much to play, she is very important because she is responsible for the twist in the story. It was because of her that the protagonist had to go to his in-laws' place. In order to project himself better there, he had to borrow certain things. She likes the watch that he had on his wrist and insists that he gave it to her. Hence, he had to tell lies that it is lost and had to cut down expenses so as to repay the amount. So we can say that the story moves further because of the character of the wife. Otherwise, the story wouldn't have moved. Premchand started his literary career in 1901 and continued it till his death in 1936. What distinguishes Premchand's works from those of other writers in India is that in them we feel the tempo of the tumultuous times in which he lived. His short stories are a true description of an epoch. The India wherein Premchand was born was undergoing a tremendous social, religious, intellectual and literary changes. Social and moral values were being challenged. Such was the time when Premchand came on to the literary stage. All the works of Premchand have a bearing on one or the other aspect of contemporary life. They deal with life, they are life. The beauty of Premchand's writing is the effective way he brings forth the exquisiteness of the language through his simplistic style. By mere mentions of mundane things like hookah, which is a smoking pipe, achkan, a long coat, bigas, festivities like Satyanarayan Katha, Janmashtami, Durgapat, etc. The terms of address which were prevalent during those times like Panditji, Thakurayan, Dobi, Mali, Maharaj and so on, they succinctly recreate the then existing social stratification. Revisiting those times, you are wrapped with officers and authorities like Daroga Sahib, Munimji, Zamindar, Tahsildar, Raja Sahib and other Babujis and even Sadhu Maharajs and Krantikaris, etc. The success of a short story depends on the gradual unfolding of the plot, which is inextricably interwoven, interdependent and merged with incident, setting and character. The short story is a single artistic unit, an organic whole guided by a totality, that is a unity of impression, of action, of place and of time. The narrative unity is very important. Narration accelerates flow. The story unfolds itself, advancing gradually towards the climax. Now, in the short story, climax is very important. The present story, The Wristwatch, is well in accordance with all these features of a short story. The Wristwatch is a short story abundant in literary techniques whose stylistic effects customize the entire course of the story. Rather than working towards an evident climax, the story's center of interest is the interaction between the characters and the power of the movement. The storyline shifts from one image to the other in order to corroborate and empower the psychological profile of the protagonist. The interpersonal relationships between the protagonist and his wife, the protagonist and his friend Danu are presented in a manner that will enable the readers to judge the character of the protagonist. Most of the story is conducted through his effectiveness and strength of sensory perceptions. The author uses a lot of adjectives, verbs, nouns, and certain phrases to obtain the desired effect of intimacy and involvement. The reader can easily understand and empathize with the narrator because it is a real-life character. Premchand very cleverly presents the contemporary situations of the times by explaining how it is difficult to get along with just 30 rupees a month. There is also a tinge of mockery on the social evil prevalent during that times, that is, the dowry, where he comments that it would be foolish to think that one can get a good watch by paying a high price, which is similar to thinking that one can get a good bridegroom by giving a large dowry. There's a lot of sarcasm in his dialogues when Danu asks him if he spends all 30 rupees that he gets. He only has to say 30 rupees is all. He had no say. That is a sarcasm. The social setup during that time is well projected, where he explains how he could manage with 30 rupees a month. 20 rupees to the hotel for boarding and lodging, 10 rupees for other expenses like laundry, haircut, cigarettes, occasional entertainment and clothes, etc. There is a drastic change in the character of the protagonist, where he realizes the importance of life. He feels guilty about his earlier behavior and he says, I am now ashamed of the fact that my wife has to be supported by others. How foolish that I left her there and I was more focused on my personal life. There is also a realization in the character of Danu when he looks at the sincerity with which his friend is repaying the amount every month. He cut down his expenses to 15 and he is repaying the other 15 to him. He says, I am ashamed of my selfishness. The characters in the story are not basically bad, but it is the situations that demand them to behave so. There is growth and development in the characters towards the end of the story as compared to their behavior at the beginning of the story. Thus we understand that both the narrator and Danu, they have changed themselves. There was a resurrection, there is a realization and change, so both of them can be called as round characters where they changed themselves when compared to the beginning of the story. That is the story, The Wristwatch by Premchand. Hope you enjoyed the session. Thank you.